Hello, everyone. Welcome to Living Sufism. My name is Puran. A couple of logistical issues just before we begin. As we suggested last time, the best way to experience this session of Living Sufism is to stay in speaker view. And the simplest way to do that is to move your cursor to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and make sure that speaker view rather than gallery view is selected. I would also like to mention, just as a reminder, how you find the web page for Living Sufism, and in particular for this session. Excuse me a moment, I'm getting a text. We're sort of assembling the pieces here at the last minute. So the web space for Living Sufism this year is found through the Sufi Way Open Path website, sufiway.org. There you will find listed under programs, Living Sufism, and click on that. It'll take you to the top page for the entire series. And there you'll see a series of little islands to access the page on Wonder. Simply click on that little island. You'll find most of the material that we're going to engage with today posted there so that you can review and refresh. As we begin, let me draw a path of continuity from what we did in our first session on Original You to what we're doing in this session on Wonder. The overall arc of Living Sufism this year is beloved community. And we're here on behalf of beloved community. As Pir Elias mentions in the essay of that title in his notes from the Open Path, the beloved community is all around us. It's also not yet. And it is in pursuit of both of these possibilities, both of these observations, that we're engaging in this Living Sufism series. On the one hand, enabling us to recognize and see and honor the beloved community that is here now, all around us, as Elias says. And on the other hand, to step into the not yet, to be more effective in giving life and reality to that beloved community in the world immediately around each one of us. Our homes, our families, our friends, our neighbors, our communities. So it's in service of both of these possibilities, making it more visible to us that the beloved community is indeed here. And at the same time, working more effectively in the direction of enabling the beloved community to become real in our lives and in the lives around us. As we approach this possibility today, we're recognizing that beloved community is unlikely to become a reality if we simply approach it intellectually. The rational faculties will not fully recognize the beloved community because they will need to posit the opposite. What about the wars? What about the cruelty? What about the rape of the planet? How is that the beloved community? So we need to access our knowing of the beloved community at another level. We're calling that level, for want of a better term, wonder. So that's our focus for today. Not so much understanding what wonder is, but remembering how we access wonder. You know, for many of us, especially over this last year, and actually in the United States over the last number of years, the world has been so busy and so crowded with madness and confusion that it is difficult for us to access wonder. The information overload that most of us live in perhaps makes us a little bit jaded, a little bit inured to a deeper way of knowing. So hopefully this will encourage us to refine and explore wonder. And, you know, if by that I would mean something like a childlike curiosity that relinquishes knowing in the way that we typically know things, and that looks for and finds the poetry, the music, just below the surface of all of the information and confusion that is making our world so busy. So that's our approach for today. That's our path for today. Let's begin by a short piece from the Tao Te Ching on the subject of wonder, read by Isha. We've made a little video clip, and as we did previously, I'm going to share that video with you. So give me a moment while I bring that up on the screen. Now I'll share the screen with you. I invite you to sit back, relax, and let this enter into you.
Existence is beyond the power of words to define. Terms may be used, but are none of them absolute. In the beginning of heaven and earth, there were no words. Words came out of the womb of matter. Words came out of the womb of matter. And whether one dispassionately sees to the core of life or passionately sees the surface, the core and the surface are essentially the same, words making them seem different only to express appearance. If name be needed, wonder names them both. If name be needed, wonder names them both. From wonder into wonder, existence opens. From wonder into wonder, existence opens. Apologies, I had trouble getting my video to start working. One little glitch. So good morning, well, good afternoon and good evening for that matter. Greetings to all of you, and I offer my thanks to you as well for your presence today. It really is a pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Jeannie Rana. Jeannie was initiated into the Sufi way 30 years ago by Murshida Sitara. She is a poet and the co-founder, along with her husband Kiran, of the Bay Dervish Center of the Sufi Way in Alameda, California. Jeannie, we're going to have a little conversation today, and I'm going to start by asking you a question. We're caught up in words so much of the time. And what we want to explore, I think, is the relationship that poetry brings for us. What relationship poetry brings to wonder.
I think that's a fantastic question, and sort of at the root of what poetry means to me. You know, words are fantastic communicators for all of us, and yet there are things that we really can't put into words. The Lao Tzu piece that you just saw or heard, it talks about that there are in our bodies and in our experiences, there are so many things that we can't find any words for. And poetry, this is all me, this is my opinion about poetry. Poetry explores that edge between what we can express and what we can't express. So if you see a sentence on a page, it's got a beginning and a middle and an end, and we all logically relate to that if it makes sense to us. But when you see a poem on a page, or when you hear a poem, there are bits missing, and there are places for silence. And that's more in touch with our emotional being, and I think also in touch with our somatic being. So for me, poetry evokes that place beyond words. It's a paradox. You're using words to try to express things that can't really be said. The things that are the deepest in our hearts, the things that hurt the most, the things that give us the most joy. So
is wonder the way into poetry, in a sense? Is poetry the way into what? Where's you know,
that's yeah. It depends upon the kind of poetry. You know, there are sort of poems that are full of political stuff or logical stuff. The poems that I'm the most interested in are the poems that evoke wonder, because I'm after wonder. You know, that's been my goal all the time, and it seemed to me that the experiences that I had as a child, and the experiences that I had in nature, and the experiences that I've had all the way through, I can express what's going on in me most easily by messing around with poetry and words in poetry. The poetry is, for me, is a little bit like prayer. It's a holy sort of relationship, and if prayer works, it puts me in a place of that I can't quite describe, and so a good poem puts me in that same place, and I know when it does that and when it doesn't. You know, other things that I can tell you about wonder is that wonder is an emotional experience, and I think poetry can expand our emotional experiences. You know, I can write you a whole big description of a beautiful daffodil, and but I can't really get into the emotion of it as much without trying to write it without poems, not a poem. Yeah.
You know, at the end of the little blurb that we wrote for the kind of introduction to all of this Living Sufism series, it says something like this. It says I'm paraphrasing now, but the wonder of wonders is that at the end of this, we don't really know what's going on.
We have no idea.
Yeah, that's probably more what it said, that we really have no idea what it is that's going on in any moment, but we assume. And we use words to help us with
Yes.
those assumptions. So where's the bridge there? How do we find our way even to the bridge? Never mind get across it.
What is the bridge that you're after? The bridge between wonder and words? You have to use words. And well, I have to use words when I talk to you, to quote a T.S. Eliot poem. I got to use words when I talk to you, but the words, the wonder is way beyond the words. Music is another thing I think that holds this for me. Wonder to me has to do with imagination and the mind of the child. We all had wonder as children. I mean, everything was new. How does this work? Why is that? You know, if you talk to a toddler, they're busy with why. And our educational system and life experiences tamp that down so that when you're my age and spring comes, it's easy to say, oh yeah, it's spring again, and to not actually have the experience of seeing those buds on the trees and have the experience of the sap beginning to rise and have an emotional reaction to that, which is wonder. How does that happen?
Oh.
So as a poet, I spend a lot of how does that happen time. And I have to pay very close attention, and I have to have no agenda. And that's a paradox.
Mm-hmm.
I have to sit or allow the page to just be there. And sometimes it's like daydreaming for me. And then sometimes it's like I feel like I'm channeling something, that the poem just comes onto the page. I have no idea how that even happened.
Yeah.
So it's pretty deep.
Jeannie, you're saying, you're identifying things that I think are really helpful and I would almost say crucial to wonder, particularly if we consider that what we're exploring here is poetic sensibility, not so much the craft of poetry per se, which is a whole other thing and something that you have been very helpful to many of us with, but with the poetic sensibility that is ready
Right.
to experience wonder. And so, for example, you're pointing to a childlike outlook, you're pointing to imagination, you're pointing to the willingness to allow something to arrive. Even the thought of daydreaming, being in a state of quasi contemplation. So would you suggest that these are ways that we can cultivate poetic sensibility, whether or not we consider ourselves to be a poet, because many of us, don't.
I assume that the things that you've just mentioned will definitely enhance your sense of wonder. Now, whether you want to take that wonder and make it into a poem, that's one avenue. Like poetry is just the avenue. Words are just one avenue for wonder. I think that there's, I think wonder can be video, wonder can be sound. There's an element of the body that is important here in terms of wonder for me. It's like we have a pulse and we have breath, and that creates a rhythm. So there's all this rhythm all the time, as we walk, there is rhythm. And poetry, I think, gets to the rhythm. Music and poetry get to the rhythm of life, which I think is a wonder. It's wonder. Yeah. So, and the beauty of sound, the way words come together, that's another wonder. You put a line of words together and they sound amazing. And there's a part of you that goes, oh. So it's important for me as a person to try to keep that part of myself alive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I recognize it in other people. You know, I see, oh, that's another person who's trying to do this, or oh, so I don't know if that explains anything, but you know, the question is, one of the questions is, well, how's your child today? What does your child want to do today? And being able to move outside of the regimented life that we have, and sit in the garden, I don't know, go for a walk. And this is nothing unusual. Poetry is somehow put on some sort of pedestal, and I think it's just one of the avenues. You know, a person who pots, a person who makes anything, has that feeling of timelessness. And for me, timelessness also has something to do with wonder. You're out of time. I mean, I'm out of time, but I mean, you know, you're not in time.
Right.
I'm often out of time, but I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not in time. Yeah. I love it that you're doing something on wonder. I think it's basic, and I think it's overlooked. So.
Yeah, I'm very much understanding. You know, the other day when we were talking about this, Jeannie, you helped me see something which was, wow, a real illumination. It felt like I had never seen that before. That this state of wonder, particularly when we think about it through the avenue, as you say, of poetry, is not just an emotional experience that exalts. It's also rich with information.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing you say is that the poet is able to then find ways of expressing what has been revealed in that moment of wonder in a way that doesn't trap it, in a way that continues to allow it to live.
And also, if it's a good poem, the poet has allowed someone else, the reader, to experience something. And what the reader will experience will not necessarily be the same thing that the poet intended. So there's some kind of magic about the poem that is, it's like its own entity. It's like it comes and it says, okay, I want you to put me on the page, and then someone else is going to read it, and Paran is going to say, oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that issue of that place of subjectivity and objectivity that you've just represented is really important. And for me, it speaks to a kind of a freedom that I can feel when I'm reading something, knowing that I don't have to delve into the world of, oh, what does that mean? What did she mean by what, you know, and then go to the dictionary, although I will go to the dictionary, I have to all the time. But you know what I mean? There's a kind of a freedom that's almost implicit in the way you describe this for me as a reader or as a participant in the work.
We all are filled with poetry. If you think about how many nursery rhymes do you remember? Hickory dickory dock. And your body wants to move. Jack and Jill went up the hill. Those are our first experiences of poetry. And those are not necessarily filled with wonder, but maybe they are, you know.
For the child, they were.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. And I don't remember the hopscotch, not the hopscotch, but the jump rope things. But there were all these rhymes that you would do with jump rope, and the body's moving, and the breath and the pulse and the words, and it makes us high, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So So poetry's got a bad rep, you know, in terms of, oh, well, it turned into something really heavy and I have to work to understand it. No. But as I said, this is me. This is just the way that I think about it. I'm sure that somebody else would say something totally different. But for me, poetry is filled with wonder, and poetry is one of my main avenues to connect to wonder. What I read, and then what comes to me also when I write. So I have 3 poems up on this thing, 3 wonder-filled poems on that website. And if you have questions, any more questions that you want me to talk about, I don't know what our time is here, but if not, I thought I would read one of those poems because I think it's a good example.
One more question. Can I ask one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It just occurred.
You can ask as many questions as you want.
You have, perhaps not recently because of so many reasons, but you have over your life in Alameda, I know you have spent a lot of time singing with a choral group. And I was just now, it penetrated my thick skull about how you combine singing with words. The words are sometimes very old, you know, very, very old words that are coming from, you know, from some sort of a biblical source or religious source somewhere. So I just now wonder, I wonder how that fits for you in terms of your experience with poetry and with wonder, the process of singing and incorporating those words and, you know, the structure that offers and what that brings for you.
That's a beautiful realization. It leads me to an idea that a belief that at very, very ancient peoples in the beginning times, there was movement, there was dance, and there was singing, and then there were words. And I don't know which of those 3 came first, but those are primal, right? Song and words and movement. And I mean, I see that, and my imagination goes to people sitting, you know, around a fire and then moving, getting up and moving, a drum. So yes, singing is also very important to me. Yes, Qawwali singing, you know, it's like, it's ecstasy. Quite honestly, I'm just an ecstasy junkie.
Jeannie, before you read your closing poem,
Sure.
And let me just mention that once you've read that poem, we're going to take a little stretch break that I think Isha is going to lead us in before we continue on. I just want to reflect how valuable I find it that you've mentioned rhythm, and now in talking about singing, sort of the implication of the drum, that in a sense, in a way, wonder is a rhythm. It's entering into a kind of a rhythmic response, call and response with something that is unspoken or unheard but present. And I think that that's a vital understanding, and that may be one of the reasons why poetry is such an excellent, and music too, such an excellent avenue for wonder.
Yes.
Because of this, it's about a certain rhythm, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. And when I write a poem, like the poem I'm going to read is called "The Stones Sing." When I write a poem, it's like the rhythm appears. It's like I don't think, okay, I'm going to do this one 5 syllables and this one 3 syllables and this one 2 syllables. Although I do that sometimes, but so anyway, it just, the rhythm appears. Let me have a little water. Listen, stones breathe slower than trees. I just heard an echo. Am I
Could you
okay?
start again, Jeannie? You froze a bit. Start
Okay,
again,
yeah,
please.
sure. The stones sing. Listen. Stones breathe slower than trees. Everything prays, even the machines of war. It is all song. From the beginning, it is all praise. It is all song. From the beginning, it is all praise. Easy to point to the latest disaster. Harder to hear the stones breathe. Come with me. Come with me. We will sing the old hymns and praise this broken world. Come with me. We will sing the old hymns and praise this broken world. We will listen to the songs the stones sing. We will listen to the songs the stones sing. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Wow.
So before we move on, as we normally try to do, I want to invite everybody out there who's been sitting for at least a half hour, a little over a half hour, to take just a second and stretch. You can stand up in place, move your body around, take a few deep breaths. Indeed, take a few deep breaths. Get it up and going. Feel your body. Come back in. Plop up and down on your seat if you want to remind yourself where your butt is. Move your legs, even if you're still sitting. Just anything to reawaken, just in case. Wow, that was good. Thank you.
Great. Oh, yes. I've just gotten a text from Carol reminding us that if anyone is having technical difficulties, she can be reached at carol@sufiway.org. And that also gives a moment to tip of the hat and bow to Carol, who's behind the scenes holding us together in a very significant way, and has been certainly a part of this, well, actually, living Sufism since its inception. So thank you, Carol. We thought we'd stay with poetry for a moment as we continued into the next phase, which we're calling the Ways of Wonder, offering some ideas and suggestions and practices, again, to access wonder. You know, when we experience wonder, we don't need to understand it or explain it or define it. It is what it is. And so the three of us each has approached the idea of experiencing wonder through a different avenue, through a different way. And so we'll begin to move into the ways of wonder with a wonderful entry point, I think, a poem of Murshid Fazl Inayat Khan. Those of you who know Murshid know that in the 70s, for several years, he furiously wrote poetry. So we've taken a couple of stanzas from a much longer poem entitled Hollow Clouds and visualized it, created a little video for it, and have spoken over that video, both to invoke his presence and his energy and his spirit, and to bring us to that dimension of understanding that he was so uniquely able to do with so many of us, and in this instance, through this poem. So once again, just give us a moment to get off the screen and share the screen with you. The pale red and green images were warm and succulent against the ice-blue background of hollow clouds and dark, shining blackness, in which all sight disappears. The gas-like expanse contained itself everywhere, yet in each image produced, the containment showed the infinite. Hail to thee, eternal screen before the self-same which is me. Glory I see, the glory of two expectations, meeting in this expanse of states and colors, where images sometimes become background, while backgrounds unfold into forms. Meeting verily in this total emptiness, meeting where nothing else can be, where nothing is, and nothing was, and nothing ever shall be. Meeting there is really true, an exception of the reality. There were hollow clouds also somewhere within what the mind would behold. Hollow clouds where clarity and distinction somehow had densified enough out of the dark, shining blackness so that its ice blue shape emerged for me to see clearly. Yet what form could it be? One cloud and a million other hollow ones still look alike and yet are never the same in their distinctiveness, have no exactitude. I affirmed my thought and discovered the dream of color and shape and form. Come to where the meeting is to be, where all is everywhere and nothing can be anymore.
Come to where the meeting is to be, where all is everywhere and nothing can be anymore. Thank you, Puran. Thank you, Jeannie and Isha. And thank you most of all to each one of us making our circle today. There are 100 of us. Imagine that for a moment. It's quite a circle. 100 of us across the globe. Let's take a breath and ground that thought. As Puran said, the next part of our program today we've called Ways of Wonder. With Jeannie, we considered the way of poetry. She spoke also of music, of singing, of drumming, of rhythm, of sitting together around a fire, friendship, all of these different ways of wonder. Isha, Puran, and I are now going to offer some other ways that we feel help us enter wonder. And I'm going to begin with one I'd like to share. I'm going to start my offering with a quote from Rumi, from his Mathnavi. In this quote, he is offering words as if spoken by the one being. The source of all says, Hindus praise me in terms of India, and the Sindhis praise in terms from Sind. I am not made pure by their magnificats. It is they who become pure and precious. We do not look to language or to words, we look inside to find intent and rapture. A burning heart is what I want. Consort with burning. Kindle in thy heart the flame of love. Well, strong words. I love words. I love books. I love how it's possible for definition to sometimes interweave with invocation. And when that happens, something arises, something we cannot put into words. Just like Jeannie said, it's a mystery. It's magic. Words speak to us of how it is when words come from the heart, to the heart. When words rise on the flame of love and melt our boundaries. But words are not always like that, not for me anyway. And I'm not always in a state of wonder. I sometimes have a restless mind that brings too many words at once. Words come upon words. Thoughts chase thoughts. It's all in my head. And when that happens, I get too busy. It all mounts up. And my heart feels cold. And I feel lonely. And I fall away from wonder. And so I would like to share with you all a practice that I work with when that state arises in me. I call the practice quiet and calm, peace arises. Quiet and calm, peace arises. As Puran said, this will all be up on the webpage. And please feel free to adopt and adapt the practice if it's at all helpful. So I invite you now to close your eyes. And when I say I, please imagine it is you saying I. Quiet and calm, peace arises. Quiet. First, I listen. I listen for the sounds coming into my ears. I hear a sound and I notice that it's coming from outside of me. I notice the sound and I notice the distance between the sound and me, my ear. That distance is actually silence. The sound moves through silence into my ear. That sound is not coming from me. I listen for another sound. I notice it too travels through the silent distance into me. But it's not me. It's sound coming through silence into me. And I repeat this listening and noticing until I know that I'm in the silence. I'm part of the silence that the sound is coming through. I'm in the quiet. I'm listening. I'm quiet. Then I bring my listening closer into me. Perhaps my arm moves. I hear cloth on cloth. Or my hand touches my face. And I can hear skin on skin. I swallow. I hear the echo inside my jaw. Maybe I can hear my breath. Sometimes I can hear my pulse or my heartbeat. But I know that the sound enters and the sound leaves in the silence. even inside me. It's traveling through the silence. It comes and it goes. It's not me. I am in the quiet, and I stay in the quiet until it's not words in my head. It's a felt sense. I am the quiet. I am quiet. And then I can move to the word calm. Calm. Here I am. Here. I scan my body now, checking that it is calm, looking for any sense of where it is not calm. Sometimes there is an ache somewhere, a pain, a tension, a tightness, an irritation, an itch. Perhaps lights behind closed eyes, or a brightness. Whatever it is, wherever it is, I find it. I notice it's pushing the calm and squashing it into a corner. Wherever not calm arises, I take my quiet awareness there. I take the quiet that I am, and I rest there for a while, in the place of not calm, and I just let it be. I offer the quiet to the not calm, just simple and tender, until I notice that actually now it is calm. It's like it just needed me to be there, present for a moment, so it could rest. I continue to check for not calm, and when there is nothing to find, I become aware that I am quiet and I am calm, and peace arises. As calm is given space to breathe, peace arises naturally and radiates love all by itself. It offers itself. I do nothing. There's nothing to do. It happens by itself. And right now, it's all that I am. And every breath that I take, breathing in, it kindles the flame of that love, held deep within the heart's hearth, burning the flame of love brighter, burning brighter. And every out-breath offers who, the divine mystery. Who, who, who.
I'm sitting in this calm that you have given to me, Suzanne. Thank you. And I know I have to talk now, so forgive me for, excuse me, forgive me for that. And also forgive me for a bit of a cough I have, which may show up as we go along. I was talking with my friend Carol a while back, and because we knew this was coming up, I got around to talking with her about wonder. After some time, she said, what comes up for me is surrender. I didn't understand that. I really didn't get it in the moment. So we talked about it some more, as we often do, around it and about it, and excuse me, and then we landed, at least temporarily, on surrender your knowing. So then, of course, one must wonder, what does it mean to surrender my knowing? Whatever the next experience is that arises for you, for me, to the extent that experience is layered with your knowledge and your previous experience, to that extent, you are not available for what is happening right here, right now. From my perspective, that's true of everything, so it's also true of words. The words I'm speaking now, it's true for a poem, any poem. So I want to be with a poem with you. As I wind my way through and into a poem, sometimes clumsily, sometimes joyfully, sometimes painfully, I hope to release the initial sense of meaning or effect of what I read. I hope that my knowing will surrender itself up and wonder may open into me, may open through me. The key is that I don't take for granted what I'm reading, that I don't assume I get it when I read it the first time. Quite often I need to read aloud. When I do, I feel the sound and silence, and thank you, Suzanne, for that expression. It fits for me right here. I feel the sound and silence more clearly. So here's a poem. Many times I have been asked, what is it like to know the truth? God, Hafiz, my Murshid? He never said he knew the truth, not once in all those years. Do you know the truth? I don't. I don't know anyone who does. But here it is. Many times I have been asked, what is it like to know the truth? And my answers have varied depending on who posed the question. Now there is my Murshid. 3 people ask the same question, 3 people get 3 different answers. So it is, so it fits. But it's a mystery how that works. My answers have varied depending on who posed the question. I'm posing the question. But this one I've never quite said before, and it is, to know the truth is to be able to enjoy deeply anything that can happen in this world. To know the truth. Many times I have been asked, what is it like to know the truth? To know the truth is to be able to enjoy deeply anything that can happen in this world. All of it. Do you feel that? Enjoy it all. For the one who knows the truth, many times I have been asked, what is it like to know the truth? For the one who knows the truth knows all is perfect. No, that can't be. How can that be? All can't be perfect. Can it? I've been known to say, all is well, whatever that means. I am troubled by this. I am not right now deeply enjoying anything. And yet, for the one who knows the truth, all is perfect. And there it is, a perfect ending. But not yet. For then, many times I have been asked the truth. For the one who knows the truth knows all is perfect, but sometimes it is best. Sometimes it is best I pretend as if it is not. Not? I pretend if it is not. Why do I do that? Why would I pretend it is not? Some words come to mind about this. They are, there are wings that can applaud even the madness, but to it never add one's own precious touch. There are wings. Do I feel them? Do I have wings? Is it an angel applauding my madness? But to it never add one's own precious touch, that precious touch. To the madness from the wings, I am lost. And I'm okay with being lost. The seer can see any event as if it were the only event that has ever happened in creation. The seer can see any event as if it were the only event that has ever happened in creation or will happen right now, right here. Can I see? Can I see any event as if it were the only event that has ever happened or will happen? Where is that moment right now? Do you feel it? Thus, it all appears miraculous. Miraculous. and there it is. There it is. Sometimes it is best I pretend as if it is not. Excuse me. Sometimes I pretend it is best I pretend as if it is not. And in so doing, at some point it may appear miraculous. Miraculous. Would it then not? Many times I have been asked, what is it like to know the truth? And my answers have varied depending on who posed the question. But this one I have never quite said before, and it is to know the truth is to be able to enjoy deeply anything that can happen in this world. For the one who knows the truth knows all is perfect. But sometimes it is best I pretend as if it is not. Some words come to mind about this. There are wings that can applaud even the madness, but to it never add one's own precious touch. The seer can see any event as if it were the only event that has ever happened in creation or will happen. Thus all appears miraculous. Miraculous. Would it not? It is always personal reading a poem. What I read, what I focus on is not the same as for you. Simple, really. My experience, while it may be similar, is not yours. My response will not be at all yours. On our website for Wonder, you'll find 2 poems from that dear friend Hafiz. This one, Would It Not Be, and another called Today. We invite you to meet these poems, one or another or both. Explore them. Let them touch you and surrender your knowing to the wonder that may open.
Lovely, lovely. So the last way of wonder that we will explore comes from hope that at least one of the things that is being recognized about wonder is that it is a form of transmission. In other words, we tend to think of wonder as something that's happening to me. I'm having an experience of wonder, but perhaps don't fully recognize that so is she, the beloved, who delivered that wonder. Whether this is absolutely true or not, who knows? But I choose to believe that wonder is a form of conversation. As we explored with Jeannie, there is a richness of information as well as experience in wonder. There's something that we're being shown, something is being revealed, something is being told to us. And so thinking about wonder as actually a form of transmission brings me to this particular way of wonder. The realization that, especially in these days when we can't hug one another, the primary or one of the primary forms of transmission is the eyes. And the eyes have this capacity for conversation because, as we know, they both receive and radiate. So, for example, when we have eye contact with someone, usually it's because we're trying to really understand what they're saying, or we're trying to make sure they understand what we're saying. So the eyes work in both as receivers and transmitters. And so vision is a wonderful way to think about wonder, the transmission that occurs in wonder. This, for example, is signaled in one of Rumi's very famous poems, Coleman Barks, called The Great Wagon. In that poem, and I'm sure many of you will remember this, he says to us, "The breezes at dawn have secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep." People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. So could he be talking about the pupil of the eye, round and open? And he's saying we go back and forth. So there is this engagement, there's this call and response, there is this aliveness that flows between us and this through the eyes. So we thought to suggest a couple of practices that might enable us to be more cognizant of this ability, of this power, and perhaps bring it to another level. The first practice is very simple, very practical, and it has to do with allowing, comfortably relaxing, allowing eye contact with everyone, both with your intimate relations and loves and family and friends, but anyone you meet out there in the world. And I know that in the world of COVID, well, the eyes are basically all we've got. But to actually allow eye contact. And the key to this practice is that we're not looking in someone's eyes because we want to tell them something or because we want to get something from them, but more in the spirit of recognition, of allowing flow, transmission. So I encourage us for the next month at least to try to be aware of eye contact, try to be open to it, try to hold oneself in a relaxed and respectful way in the presence of another person through their eyes. You know, they say the eyes are the windows of the soul. In this way, we could almost say that everyone we meet is at least a momentary soul mate. And in that mating, there is a discovery of the soul that is possible. The other practice is called by some Sufi circles Tawazhou. And it is the practice of looking into the eyes of your teacher, your guide. Often, when the teacher is physically present, this is actually sitting down face to face, excuse me, and gazing into one another's eyes, simply, with no expectation, with no agenda, just present. And since in these days we're unlikely to be in the physical presence of our teacher, we can use the other dimension of this practice, Tawazhou, which is to internally visualize the eyes of your teacher, of your guide, or of any one who can inspire you. So it may be someone who's living or someone who has deceased. It may be someone you've never met. I sometimes experience looking into the face and the beautiful eyes of Hazrat Inayat Khan. I never met him. But in those experiences, I must say, he becomes quite present. But you can find some figure, some person, Jesus, the Sufi saint Rabia, the Buddha. So let's try this just for a couple of minutes. I invite you to close your eyes and relax into your seat. Allow your breathing to relax. Become comfortable in your chair, in your seat, to the degree that it's possible and comfortable. Sit up straight. And now allow on the screen of your imagination, allow someone to appear, the face of someone. Again, maybe someone you know or someone you don't. Imagine that you're looking at their face and gradually they lift their eyelids and they look at you and you look at them. And you stay in that transmission. Let's do this for a little while and allow it to become real to you so that it's not just a picture, but in a way, a living presence gazing in your eyes. Suzanne?
Okay, we can open our eyes now. Thank you, Puran. We're coming towards the end of our program today. Time to consider how to take this home and to develop our own experiences and understandings of wonder. These Living Sufism sessions, we're here to share seed thoughts and ideas and questions, not necessarily offer answers. We heard from Isha his invitation to read poetry aloud, to enliven the words with our breath and our being. We have the invitation now from Puran to seek eye contact, both in daily life and in meditative visualizations. And now I'd like to offer a few thoughts on how we can bring our inner pilgrimage chiller through the landscape of wonder. All of these contributions will of course be posted up on our beloved community webpage, so do go there. How then might we kindle and keep alive the flame of wonder? Here are a couple of ideas, but perhaps you have others. The real chiller is to find yours. The first is seeking beauty, following beauty, walking in beauty. Beauty is certainly one of the ways we can find wonder. Where do you look? What do you see or hear or do? When you uncover beauty, what happens in you? A second way of wonder is in the state of not knowing that Jeannie spoke of, that Isha spoke of. Nourishing uncertainty, valuing the unknown, enlivening the child in us. And there's just of course, there's many ways to do this. But some of the ways also is to change our body and our sense receptors. So change the hands we're used to using. Move out of having focus and move into peripheral vision. That's one I use a lot. If I'm feeling stuck, I move into peripheral vision. And something really does open up for me. Another idea is to stop naming things. When we walk in the woods, for example, stop naming trees and leaves and grass and squirrels and birdsong. Just be with it, just experience it. Changing patterns for a little while, changing timings, changing when we get up, when we go to bed, what time we eat, changing what we eat, changing our breath, changing habits. And another thing is a useful practice is Apir Elias's release at inception practice that we've put up on the website. And it comes from chapter 8 in his Open Path book, The Art of Awakening, which is also an interesting chapter to read on walking into wonder. Anything really that brightens your sense of wonder, please do that. Thank you. Puran?
We're just here to say goodbye. See you next time. Thank you for joining us. And I hope that we can all experience the beloved community, as Elias writes in that essay, in every act of love, in every moment of joy, in every experience of wonder.
We're going to close with a Sufi poem, unacknowledged when it first appeared in the mid-20th century. I wonder who wrote the Book of Love. Tell me, please tell me, who wrote the Book of Love? For I do love. Yes, I do. It says it is so in the Book of Love. I've got to know the answer. Was it someone from above? Oh, yes. Who wrote the Book of Love? Bye-bye, one and all. Well, until next time.